So, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another Kansas City AI Club meetup. My name is Chris Kovac. I'm one of the co-founders of the Kansas City AI Club. Appreciate you being here. So I always ask questions of the audience to kind of get a sense of who's here and where are you at from your AI journey. Who here first time to a Kansas City AI Club event? Wow, that is amazing. How many people here have been to 3 or more? Wow, what a great distribution. Again, I appreciate you joining us tonight. So the other thing I like to do is I like to take a photo of the audience, because I think when people think of AI enthusiasts, I think they think of maybe grumpy people who are waiting for the Terminators to take over, and that is the inverse, right? We have a bunch of happy, energetic people here, so if you could do me a favor and just say hi when I count to 3 so we can take a nice picture, you guys would rock, and that would mean a lot to me. So, all right, are you ready? 1, 2, 3, all right. Oh, you guys rock, thank you very much. Okay. State of the Kansas City AI scene. So I was chatting to some people before we started here, and people that are new to the AI scene and the AI community. Kansas City punches above its weight class when it comes to AI. What do I mean by that? There is a lot of activity, innovation, amazing companies from startups all the way up to billion-dollar companies are here right in this city. How cool is that? We have the World Cup, we have the Chiefs, we have the Royals, we have sporting, we have this community college. There are so many great things going on. My good friend runs the generative AI group in Boston. They average between 80 to perhaps as much as 150-ish. We have about 140 people here this evening. So if you think about Cincinnati or Minneapolis or other kind of peer cities, we are head and shoulders above. Tons of innovation coming out of the city. So I think this is great. This is great because that happens with people in this room, like Mr. Daniel up here and so many other people. So let's please keep the innovation going. Let's keep the discussions going. And it's a great time to be a Kansas Citian. On the other hand, if you like what you see here tonight, in other words, if this is beneficial for you, please help us get the word out. Tell your friends, hey, there's an AI community. They have meetups, and we're going to have some additional formats as well. So we want to keep growing this thing, and we are looking for bigger venue spaces. So the AI Club, what the heck is it? One of the co-founders over here, Mr. Simon Kuo, who's doing the videography, we met through the social media club, 15 years ago, and we had coffee a little over 2 years ago, and as a photographer, he was talking about AI and how he was doing it for shot selection and storyboarding and all these things I never would have thought of. And so we came up with, hey, what if we had a club to talk about AI stuff? We literally thought it would be like 6 people or 8 people at a coffee shop or maybe a bar or something like that. And we've actually sold out every single event over the last 18 months. We keep getting bigger and bigger. Again, it's because of the people in this room and all the support. But we are volunteers, we don't get paid, we do this on our free time. So I just want you to recognize, as a matter of fact, the people that are on the board right now, Maria, and you can put your hand up too. So anyone who's currently on the AI Club board, if you could raise your hand. So these are some of the people. There are others who are helping put together these events. It takes a lot of time and energy to do it, and we're appreciative of the board. We have some really cool upcoming events. We're still working on the venues and the dates, so stay tuned for more. We have a panel discussion on cybersecurity. We're going to have a big event on AI agents. We're going to be talking about legal issues, all kinds of fun stuff. Stay tuned for that. If you want to find more about our fair club, you can go to kansascity.ai. We try to make it easy. So we are adding resources. There's video of past events and all kinds of other fun stuff that's on the website. And some housekeeping here. If you haven't seen the refreshments, back corner of the room, and then restrooms through this exit, and then through the exit in the back of the room. So I also want to say thank you to Johnson County Community College. They let us use this space. We're very thankful. And so we want to give them the opportunity to talk to you about some of the cool initiatives that they're doing. And so I'm going to pass the microphone over to Grant, and then we will kick off the panel here shortly.
As Chris said, we want to welcome you all. We're really excited to have the Kansas City AI Club here on campus.
My name is Grant Carlson. I work, whoa, that rolls. I work with our workforce development and continuing education area, and I work with our public classes. So these are classes that anyone in this room, anyone in our community can go in and sign up for individually at any time. We have classes ranging everywhere from AI and technology type classes, business leadership, to the fun stuff like beekeeping and aviation stuff with drones, those kinds of things that we have. If you're a parent with kids of a certain age like myself, you might be interested in our driver's ed classes that we host here on campus. So those are opportunities that anybody can sign up for. The other pitch that I want to make to you, and this room specifically, if you have passions, interests, things that you are an expert in, and you would ever be interested in teaching for us, we are always looking for instructors in our open enrollment classes. And so you can sign up for, we have a link on our website in continuing education where you can put in an interest form to teach for us. There's a table right outside this room that has a ton of literature about our classes and different things we have going on. My cards are also there, and you're welcome to grab one of those. Email me at any time if you're interested in teaching, and I'd love to talk to you about our programs and where you might fit in. So thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to Steph to talk about our contract training.
Well, welcome everybody. Good evening. We are so thrilled to have you on the Johnson County Community College campus this evening. My name is Steph New. I'm also with the Workforce Development and Continuing Education program. A little different than Grant, I'm on the business solutions side, where I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do. And I think how many of you have been on campus before tonight? Oh, wow. That's a lot of people. Great. So most of you probably associate community colleges with the students and the credit side of the program. Some of you might know that we have the continuing ed, which Grant talked about, the open enrollment classes for non-credit, and that could include really anything from certifications to certificates to just professional or personal development. And did you know, I'd love to see another show of hands, did you also know that we offer customized trainings for businesses? Yes, I love that. I know, I see some familiar faces. So with the business solutions side, our team focuses, and I'd like to introduce my colleague Shalon David in the back. Shalon and I are both the business solutions partners, so he'd be a great person to talk to too after the panel. But we focus on the needs of your business and really looking at solutions to meet your goals and needs that you have. And that could be a range of a lot of different types of things depending on what your focuses are, what your team needs to grow and be successful. We know that in your workplaces that everybody's busy, so we also want to make the trainings turnkey. We want to work with you, but also take that load off where we can find the instructor, come in, create everything, and make it very easy for you and your team. We can come to you on site. We can invite you here to campus for a training or a session. We could do it at the time frame that works for you and the content that is tailored to exactly what you need for your business. I just want to share a few of the popular topics right now. Leadership training, always very popular. Business skills development, soft skills, career and trades, computer technology and applications. I think Shalon and I kind of laugh about it. One of the biggest requests we get are Excel trainings, and then we always say, yeah, we could use that too. And then team building is also a popular one. So it could be something fun. It could be something that we could create on campus, a culinary class or an art class in our Nerman Museum. So just some thoughts for you. But my favorite part about customized training is the sky's the limit, essentially. It's whatever you need. We find an instructor, we figure out the content, and you get what you need too. So I encourage you to contact us for more information. Like Grant mentioned, there's some information on the table because there's a customized training piece. Feel free to grab that. There's a QR code on it. My business cards are out on that table as well. And please contact us. We'd love to talk with you more about what you might need for your business. So thank you and enjoy the program this evening.
All right, you guys ready for the main event? Yeah. All right. So I am going to introduce our very esteemed moderator, Scott Holsman, and I'm going to bring up my cheat sheet here because he has a very interesting background. But I can tell you, he actually started in radio. So he's been in the talent business for an awful long time and was a top 10 franchise for Express Employment Professionals, one of the largest organizations in the country. He's been in a number of different, involved in a number of different groups like the Rotary and the Chamber of Commerce, the list goes on. And recently he's become obsessed with AI. At least that's what the notes say, and really trying to understand how can we use AI individually as well as in our business. And after receiving 7 certifications in AI in the workforce, Scott consults with companies to help them navigate the intersection of AI and talent acquisition. This is one of the most important topics that we're focused on within the AI Club. So please give a warm welcome to Scott Holsman.
Well, greetings, everybody, and thank you for coming here tonight. Really excited for this. You know, when I think about artificial intelligence and human resources, as personally, as this thing rolls, look out, look out. I'm an old radio guy, so we can do this. You know, one of the things about human resources is after all the training that I've had, I've been in HR for 31 years now, is I think HR is the one that needs to lead the charge with artificial intelligence, and here's why. We're going to have system disruption, and so we're going to need change management, and then we're going to need learning and development because people will need to de-skill, reskill, and upskill. And then we're also going to have organizational development. So I'm getting ready to speak at the Kansas City Sherard chapter, and the president was talking about everyone's nervous about losing their jobs, and for me, this is a golden opportunity for HR because they can finally get their seat at the executive table. That I was president of our chapter in 2001. They've been telling us to do that ever since then. So that's what we're doing here. And you know, when we think about AI and how fast it's changing, is I've been telling everybody, I'm like, don't sign anything more than a 30-day contract. But anyway, so we're glad you're here. First off, I want to welcome or thank our sponsors, Mashmetrics, Excel Performers, Kovac AI, SimRush, and Dudo Co. for making this event possible. And you know, we're living through a pivotal moment in AI, and it's disrupting a lot of different things. Has anybody here been getting resumes that they're suspect? Anybody in talent acquisition that's like going, I think it's probably AI resume or AI generated resume. So there's going to be a lot of things that we're going to have to concentrate on. Now, I'm really excited tonight to have the panel here because we tried to get a variety of folks from different perspectives. Like with Ashley from the chamber, is she's going to be able to represent what the people in the chamber are talking about, because a lot of people are nervous. They really don't know about HR. So you also have Carly, Riche is the French way to say it, Suzanne Wolff, and then Dr. Richard Beyer. And so if we can start with Ashley. If you just kind of introduce yourself just real quick and let us know who you are.
Okay, it's on now. As Scott said, I'm Ashley Sherard. I'm the president and CEO of the Lenexa Chamber of Commerce, and I've really enjoyed being a champion for the area business community for more than 25 years now. If you're not very familiar with what chambers of commerce do, our mission is to support area businesses, and we do that by helping them with practical tools and making connections. We advocate on their behalf with our policymakers. We really focus on attracting business investment and workforce, and we really play a pivotal role as the business voice when you're talking about strategic planning and just planning for the future. So I'm very happy to be part of this conversation today, mostly because I'm really looking forward to the insights that I'm going to learn about and be able to take back to our organization that I think will really help guide how we help businesses navigate AI going into the future. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Suzanne Wolff. I'm the president of LandaJob. LandaJob is a recruiting agency specializing in marketing, creative, and digital roles. And we're celebrating our 40th birthday this year. We've been around for 40 years, so thanks. We love helping people find jobs. We love connecting great companies and great people. And a lot of it is trying to teach people how to navigate their job search, which is really hard. And I've never found anyone that was like, I love searching for a job. I cannot wait to work on my resume and just start interviewing. It's awesome. So we're here to help people kind of bridge that gap. It's really tough if anyone's ever been out of work or if anyone's ever had to look for a job. You know how that is. So I'm excited today to be on this panel to talk about AI and what I know and can share that with you, because there's a lot of really interesting things you can do with resumes and so on and so forth using AI, and then on the backside what that looks like as well. So you got to be careful, but there's good information out there.
Okay, I think I've got this on. Is it on? Okay, great. Hi, I'm Laura Clark-Bay, and I'm a global data privacy and AI lawyer, and also a global data privacy and AI law professor at KU Law School and at the University of Kansas Law School. My primary day job, I spend most of my time helping mostly large US and multinational organizations navigate a host of really complicated global privacy and AI related laws. And I am a lifelong learner. I love to learn, which is the only reason I can do this job, right? Because it is a constant, you're constantly learning. You're learning about the companies you work with and different aspects of how they're utilizing technologies and data. You have to learn about evolving technologies, and then you have to learn about evolving laws, and sometimes laws and regulations that are taken away, as we were talking about a minute ago. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk with all of you.
This one on? Yeah. Hello, I'm Carly Duvall of Riche. I'm the General Counsel of Cariloop. Cariloop is a caregiver support platform. We're sold as an employee benefit, so work with HR leaders across the company. What our platform does is we connect caregivers to digital tools to help them on their caregiving journey, and we also have personalized coaching by licensed care coaches that help them as well. I am an in-house counsel, so I have 15 years experience as a lawyer advising companies on how to utilize technology in a legal and compliant way, and then also working with technology companies as they develop technologies, as they adapt and change, and as they evolve to the regulatory scheme that we operate in.
Hello, I'm Rick Beyer. I've had a long career in senior human resource roles at what is now Bank of America, the state of Kansas, and J.E. Dunn Construction. In 2019, I completed a doctoral degree in industrial and organizational psychology, better known as IO psychology. And I formed a company called Integritas. And the work that I do is integrating the science of IO psychology with the practice of human resources management for a smarter workplace. Among the many things I do, I serve on the advisory board of a startup company in San Francisco called TruePulse. And TruePulse is a company that's implementing AI and machine learning and natural language processing in the human resources area. So that's a very appropriate role for the topic we're talking about today. I thank you for your interest in this topic, and I look forward to the conversation.
Well, thank you, everybody. Real quick, I want to give a shout out to my fellow Rotarians, Club 13. Hello, Kansas City Road Club. Anyway, thank you very much. If you're interested in joining Rotary, please see us. Our goal is to get into position AI is a utopian or dystopian society. And a lot of people, I think in 1984 when they're thinking about this. Instead, we want to have a nuanced, practical exploration of how organizations can implement AI throughout. So over the next 45 minutes, we're going to be exploring some questions about the legal and ethical considerations, recruitment practices, one of the big ones, privacy frameworks, employee engagement, and broader business impacts. And then we'll open the floor for questions. So how the flow will go, we'll spend about 45 minutes asking questions. After each question, if someone has a question, we might take one or two, then go to the next. and then at the end we'll open up for everybody's Q&A. I encourage you to consider your own context throughout the discussion, how this would apply to your organization. When you're a business leader, HR professional, or job seeker, or just simply curious about AI. You know, one of the things my brother's asked me today, he goes, how do you use AI? And I thought I'd give you an example. On Sunday, I was going through a Coursera course on AI. And so I had ChatGPT deep research for one of my clients was doing deep research. I had Claude analyzing a bunch of information for me, and then I'm watching videos for Coursera. So it's like having 3 employees on one computer. You know, it's just crazy. So that's some of the power that how can we become more proficient? So before we begin, I'd like to frame tonight's conversation with one overarching question. How do we harness AI's potential while preserving the fundamental element of human work and talent development? Because that's the challenge. So we're going to start off, if we can, with Laura. And Laura, I was going to ask you the question is, what do you think are the most important global, legal, ethical, and business obligations and risk organizations need to take into considerations in implementing AI tools for workforce management? I'll repeat it one more time. It says, because it's a big one. It says, what do you think the most important global, legal, ethical, and business obligations and risk organizations need to take into consideration when implementing AI?
So I think there are obviously a host of legal obligations, a host of business considerations, a host of ethical obligations. I think they vary somewhat for each company, but there are some consistent obligations that I think all companies should be thinking about. And they include things like information security. There are a number of information security laws, both in the United States and globally, that organizations should be taken into account. Privacy laws are very important when it comes to data that is being collected from individuals in the context of AI, different uses of AI. IP laws, intellectual property, whether it's patent law, whether it's copyright, whether it's trade secret, those are very significant considerations for most companies. And thinking about when you are utilizing the tool, what does the tool provider say with respect to copyright liability in the event that there's litigation? I have spoken to a lot of organizations on AI issues, and sometimes I will ask the question, how many of you have actually read your agreements with your AI providers? And I'll ask the room. How many of you all have read your AI agreement, like your terms of service, the privacy policy, any related linked? Many of them have. Doug, yes. Okay, thank you, Doug. So no one really wants to read the agreements, but the agreements are super important, both in terms of understanding what is going to happen with your data. What rights do you have to the data? What rights do they have to the data? Who can they sell the data to and or share the data with? I think they're like understanding those risks and also understanding where does the liability lie, right? In the event that there is a copyright suit that's brought, some of the major AI service providers have taken the position publicly that it's not their responsibility, it's the user's responsibility, right? So thinking about if our company is utilizing an AI tool and the terms of service don't provide otherwise, is there risk for us in that regard? And is there risk for us in terms of privacy lawsuits? So I think thinking through, and for in the context of HR, thinking also about employment laws. And the employment laws that are relevant could be at a federal level, they could be at a state level, or they could be at a city level. There are cities that have implemented AI laws, like New York has one dealing with automated decision making, and there are laws in various states governing how you utilize interviews, AI focused interviews. So those are some of the laws. From an ethics perspective, it's about trustworthiness, it's about bias and discrimination and fairness. So thinking about those kinds of issues. If you're a lawyer, that's a whole nother presentation because there are a host of ethical obligations that apply. But then I think also thinking about business risk is really, really important. And sometimes it's easy for the lawyers to just focus on the legal and or the ethical. But from a business perspective, thinking about things like what are the risks with this tool of prompt injection, right? So if the data, if a cyber criminal gets in and changes the data, what could happen? What are the risks of that? Thinking about with respect to if you're utilizing AI for purposes of biometric identification for your employees, what are the risks of a cyber criminal being able to develop synthetic voice or a synthetic fingerprint? And so thinking about how do you navigate those risks. Also, if you're utilizing some great new tool that is from a company that has not been around a long time, that has a great new tool, what are the risks that that company becomes one of the 90% of AI startups that goes belly up, right? So if that were to happen, what happens to your data, right? And I'm not at all saying don't use those startups, because some of the startups are amazing and offer great tools, but thinking through how are you going to navigate the potential risks. So really thinking through what are all the different layers of risk and how risky are they, right? So if there's a law in place that regulators don't ever, that the lawmakers and regulators don't ever put into effect, how much do you care about that? Versus a law that is very actively utilized in cases against a company or for which there's a private right of action, and so there's class action litigation. So that is a very long answer to that first question. Sorry.
Well, thank you, Laura. But one of the things is legal and ethical considerations, and with AI, especially in HR, is huge.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any more comments on what we may have said? Yeah. And then I want to go to Suzanne Wolff real quick, is because we're seeing it in my business too, is we're seeing this a lot, is how has AI altered the job search landscape for candidates, particularly regarding resume screening and evaluation?
Yes, that's a great question. How many hiring managers do we have in the audience? And then how many people have ever done a resume? Okay, good. So there's some of you. Okay, so that's a great question, and we deal with this every day at LandaJob when we have people that are applying for jobs, or they're coming to us and saying, I've applied for 30 jobs and no one's ever called me, and I'm being ghosted. We hear that all the time. So if you're one of those people that are like, yeah, that's me, the reason could be the way your resume is put together. And this room, I'm going to guess, is pretty smart in the fact of knowing how AI works with resumes. But if you don't know, I can explain that, which it's pretty amazing. But your resume is often read by applicant tracking systems. They're also called ATS. So an ATS will read the resume. If it's not formatted properly, if the orders are wrong, or the dates are done improperly, or you have too many columns, or bold print, or images, or things like that, it can just kick it right out of the system. So no matter if you're a fit or not, your resume is never going to see the light of day, because it didn't hit that criteria to move to the next step. Along with that, if you're applying through LinkedIn or Indeed or other job boards like that, AI is also looking at your resume there. So as recruiters, when we use LinkedIn for job posts, and job resumes come in, and they're sorted by most qualified on the top and the least qualified at the bottom. So, if you're an awesome person for this job and you say, why didn't I get an interview? I was made for that job. It could just be you had too many columns in your resume and it got spit out. So the good news is there's ways to overcome this. And if you educate yourself the right way, you can create a resume that's ATS friendly. And even if companies aren't using an applicant tracking system to read the resumes, if you have it right for the ATS, it's probably going to be pretty good for a human to read too. So that's a good rule of thumb. So having a good resume put together is really important. So there are ways to do it. And I tried this today. Well, you have some very fancy ways to do it, but there's also easy ways. So chat will do it, and Perplexity also. You can attach your resume and then copy paste the job description and say, can you tell me how my resume matches up against this job description? And it'll give you real examples how it could be a fit. Now, we always want to make sure we take that data and we change it around a little bit, right? You don't want to copy it word for word. Obviously, this is like AI 101, right? But as recruiters, we can tell when people do that. So that's important to know. We have candidates that will take the job requirements and then their skill set, and they'll say, and enhance, what I've written in my resume, so it's more of a fit. And Perplexity or Chat, or I'm sure there's others, can do that also. I love Perplexity. That's my favorite one to use.
My favorite too.
I use it all day, every day, from multiple things in recruiting. So it's really powerful. There's also a couple of programs there's one I really like called JobScan, and it's jobscan.ai. And you take your resume and the job description, you upload those together, and it'll show you the percentage of a match that your resume is to that job description. It allows you in real time to make edits, it'll tell you what keywords you should use. It does all these cool things, and in real time it'll show you how that your job or your resume increases as a match. So those are really powerful tools. They give job advice. They do some LinkedIn coaching too. That's a really good one. Another new one that I kind of played around with is called Teal. So Teal's really cool. You can say, take my LinkedIn profile and make a resume out of it, and it'll do it. It's kind of nice, and it also lets you track your job search through there. So there's just really great tools out there, and in this day, you have to be able to do that in order to stand out, because people are short-staffed in the world. They may not have time to read every resume that comes in, and unfortunately, that's just the way it is. And on the other hand, it's really cool. So
That's awesome. Let me ask real quick, was there anyone in talent acquisition before the internet? Okay, there's a couple of us that are old. Now let me ask you something. Do you think recruiting was easier before the internet or after the internet? Because personally, I think recruiting was much easier before the internet. How did I know that? I had 600 people a day working in Columbia, Missouri at 47 locations. My tech stack was a 286 computer and a fax machine and classified ads. And I assure you, it was so much easier then, because you just heard what she talked about and everything you have to do to jump through all these hoops. So me personally, I've been on this. I'm like, oh, could you just let people apply in person? Because if someone walks into your place of business, they got a resume, and they're there, well, for one, they showed up, so that's a good sign. And if they went all the way there, they probably had the skill sets. But this is what happens. I was at BDC luncheon, and I was talking to some folks, won't name them, but I told them that. They said, oh, that's awesome, Scott, but you know what happened if they came to our organization? We said, well, we appreciate you, but you need to go home and apply online. I'm like, well, so you're trying to be an employer of choice. You know, you're really just I mean, I don't know what people are thinking about. So, you know, and so what thinking is curious. I took a Wall Street Journal article yesterday on, it was actually about how job hoppers, their salaries are not getting what it was, but I was talking about 2,500 applications, guys still didn't get a job. I was like, oh, anybody see a problem with this tech stack? We're having to put tech stack on top of tech on tech on tech. I wrote that, there's like 10,000 hits on LinkedIn, because I think everyone relates to it. It's like, all this tech is making people crazy. But let's go to Dr. Beyer real quick, or Rick Beyer. And Rick's one of my favorite HR guys because he's just brilliant. But with what they're doing and what he is actually doing is scary. It's not scary, but for some people it makes them really nervous. So the question for Rick is, given your experience with AI-driven sentiment analysis, what are your, and you might have to explain that. What are practical ways businesses can leverage AI to proactively address employee engagement and workplace morale, ultimately enhancing retention and productivity?
I think the way I would answer that question, Scott, is that by leveraging AI-driven real-time sentiment analysis, companies can enhance engagement, they can reduce turnover, they can drive productivity, and create workplaces where employees feel heard and valued, especially if the managers in the company are actively engaging the workforce in a discussion about how to create best places to work. So that's an overarching statement. And then there are 4 considerations that I want you to at least think about. Number 1, AI provides an opportunity to augment traditional employee survey process. It may even provide an opportunity to replace traditional, laborious, and backward-looking employee survey processes with real-time continuous sentiment analysis. And I would argue at the speed of business today, we need real-time data, not episodic data. The second consideration is that AI identifies workforce sentiment trends, which allows HR teams to proactively, instead of reactively, addressing issues before they impact engagement and retention. The third thing I would say relates to this startup company that I'm a part of, TruePulse. So TruePulse actually detects morale shifts and auto-generates AI-led focus groups, one-on-one discussions, and pulse surveys. So that can mitigate survey fatigue because you're really targeting the survey work that you're doing, and it occurs much more quickly because it's AI generated. And you may have to curate some of the pulse surveys that it will generate, but it's better than starting from scratch. And the final point with regard to this question is that AI insights help businesses improve leadership strategies, enhance the employee experience, and personalize engagement efforts, reducing attrition and boosting productivity. And again, I think the one caveat is you can have all of this information, but if managers don't actively engage the workforce in a discussion about how to improve the workplace, then it's all for naught. Scott.
Sure, I appreciate that, Rick. You know, one of the things, and we've had many conversations about this, you know, because one of the things is when you're measuring sentiment in the workplace and they're watching your Slack, your emails, and your text messages, a lot of people feel like Big Brother's watching them. But we've talked about this before, you know, are we getting tracked now? I mean, why should people be afraid of that? And how are you guys protecting that information?
Well, I'll provide a brief response. I was very worried about that when I joined this advisory board. And a lot of the people that we approach in terms of using TruePulse are concerned about it too. However, I've had a couple of years to really think about this, and I can enumerate a long page of things that we all enjoy having, like a cell phone, like a navigation system in our car, perhaps a security system in our house. There are all sorts of ways that we have given up facets of our privacy for things that we want. And so one of the arguments that I think is important for employees to consider is that if they want to have a voice in shaping a best place to work, being willing to trade off some privacy so that they can participate along with their colleagues in building a better workplace might be of same value as some of the other things that we've done. Now, I would also say that at TruePulse, we de-identify all of the data that is received through the messages that we track. But it's still something that employees can doubt. But I think over time, if they actually see the results of AI improving the workforce, the trust will build.
Agreed. You know, that's one of the, you know, when we talk about this, because one, Facebook, you know, when you're on Facebook and all the social media networks, we've already given up a lot of our privacy. And so if we look at it one way, it's like instantaneous. Go ahead.
I'd like to weigh in on this one just a little bit. I am quite familiar with AI sentiment tools as they're broadly used right now, and a lot of companies use them, and I think we're at a stage where typically they're being used utilizing surveys and looking at emails and different messages between companies. But what I have read about more recently is where this may be headed is to more biometric related sentiment analysis. And that's where the privacy lawyer in me wants to say to all of you, this is where you really want to pay attention, right? Like, because Apple, not that long ago, gosh, maybe it's been a year ago now, filed a patent for brainwave tracking earbuds. And one of the ways that certain scholars have written that these earbuds may ultimately be used, right, is in the workplace, right? So in connection with wellness programs. So everyone will get their free set of earbuds, they'll be doing their work. The earbuds may pull up a message on their computer that says, you seem to be getting a little anxious right now. Now would be a good time for a 5-minute walk around the building, right? Fine, that could be viewed as beneficial. But then what if later in the day, you have an evaluation for your potential raise? You're wearing your earbuds because you never take them off. I mean, you wear them constantly, like my kids wear them constantly. You've got your earbuds in, you're having your evaluation, and they say to you, first of all, the company needs to keep you. You're really, really important, right? But the boss has been tasked with giving you as little of a raise as possible, right? But they've got to keep you. In the old world, you would have that conversation and you might say to your boss, I am walking, if you don't give me a better raise, I've got 10 other companies that want me and I'm gonna go, right? But I'm tracking your emotions utilizing your earbuds. And I know you're saying those words, but inside I know you're okay. You're not angry, you're fine. And frankly, you may be happy because you got a 3% raise. Even though you told me you wanted a 10% raise, you got a 3% raise, you're happy enough. Your earbuds are on later in the day and you're still showing as happy. And so it's when it gets to that level, right? Like there's a lot of employee monitoring, especially in the United States, that is very legal, right? And complies with applicable laws. But when you get to that biometric level, I just would suggest to all of you to really think hard about accepting the earbuds unless you're really comfortable about how they're going to be used.
And one of the other things people are doing that are kind of sneaky is, LinkedIn a while back, they didn't really tell you this, but everything you do on LinkedIn, they're feeding into their LLM. There's a way to opt out. Has anybody heard about that? So if you're on LinkedIn, make sure and opt out so you're not feeding LinkedIn all your information so they can get smarter. Anyway, go to Carly real quick. Considering global privacy standards like GDPR in Europe, what ethical and legal frameworks should organizations adopt when deploying AI in workforce management to ensure privacy and build employee trust, which is critical?
That's a big question. That's a big question with a big response. And I think for this purposes, I'll focus in on a couple things. When it comes to deploying AI in workforce development, in recruitment, and managing your talent, either attracting it or then managing it once you have it in, the two things that I think you need to be thoughtful about, both in the United States and then as you take it globally, are bias and privacy. These are things that Laura's already touched upon. And start with bias and privacy. And in both of those areas, we already have the foundational frameworks that are going to tell you what to care about. Obviously, whether you're in the United States or you're operating globally, there is a well-crafted, well-honed regime that tells you what categories are considered protected classes, the level of direct bias, obviously that's not allowed. Some places obviously have commentary on implicit bias. The fact that it is a machine or a software or AI or any other development in the area, the fact that that's where the decision making is coming from does not reduce or take away those frameworks that already exist there. And the same is true when it comes to privacy. Obviously, in the EU, there's the EU AI Act that is coming about this year, and it'll continue to add in regulatory requirements if you or your company operates there, if you have candidates you're reviewing from over there. The GDPR has been around for a long time. We know its requirements. Its disclosures will apply here, just as they do in other contexts. So the biggest piece of advice I would have in this area, especially if it's new for you or your company is just sort of dipping their toes in the water here, is know where you came from. If you start there, if you don't forget what you already know, that will take you so far. It'll make you ask the right questions and think about the right things. And then, as Laura mentioned, once you get to the level that we're really looking at, multinational, global workforces, employees in the thousands, I mean, that's really when, you bring in experts who are going to help you craft something that'll work in all the places. But when it's sitting on your desk and you're thinking of the right questions, just start with what you already know.
And following up on that, Carly, is how do you advise organizations to balance innovation and compliance when implementing AI tools, especially when the regulations vary globally?
I implement what I like to call the whack-a-mole method. I'm kidding. It's what it feels like sometimes when it does feel like in my organization every day somebody's coming in and says, hey, I've got this really cool AI tool and I want information security to review it and legal to review it and go through there. So taking a step back, if your organization is more early stage in this, the place that I would start is, if you don't already have one, you have to have an AI usage and approval policy and framework. I hope a lot of your organizations already do, but if you don't fret. Start there. If you have an AI tool in your company, a great place to start is to ask it to craft one for you. It's a starting place. But what that policy needs to govern is it needs to govern, if you have a software management policy, for example, something like that already in place, it's going to build upon that. And so you need to create a framework. Who is involved in reviewing this? That's your starting place. And so at my organization, AI tools have to be reviewed first by information security, depending on the nature of them, perhaps by the VP of engineering, and then ultimately it's my sign off before that we can implement them either in a small scale area or an enterprise level organization. The other thing that you want to put into place and think about is what are the tools from a compliance perspective, what's the training or requirements we're going to put in place as an organization. Again, in my company, you have to have an AI specific training that we have created. You have to go through that before you get access to the license and to the tool. And that was incredibly well received from our organization because there's a lot of people sitting in here who maybe have been utilizing AI in both personal and professional practices for years. You're really comfortable with it. You feel really good about it. There's a lot of people in your company that aren't there. They don't even know where to start. And so what you're trying to protect against is the unwitting release of private information that goes counter to your own privacy policies and things like that. So you train people and then, re-up it annually, just like you do with your other trainings. The other piece of that is you have to put on your no list. And so as Scott was saying, sometimes, what you sit here as I sit here as an in-house counsel and I do feel like I try very hard not to be the Department of No, because, sometimes the Department of No has to show up to the holiday party. And so I do my best to, foster engagement and integration because it really produces a better result. And so, but there are going to be some things that are no's. So I work at a technology company. We have engineers that develop code that goes into our platform, that goes into our product. That we're not utilizing AI systems for that code development because of intellectual property concerns. If that's a no from your company, you got to spell it out. You got to say it's a no. Similarly, we receive our member or user data. We receive their private information. That private information doesn't go into AI systems. It's segmented out. We don't utilize it. I came up with that. I made that rule. That's my no. And I feel very comfortable with those no's. We may evolve that, we may change that as the tools change. And so the final piece of this is that you have to kind of constantly evaluate that and revisit it and talk about it. And so the best way to do that is whether you're in compliance or HR or legal, we're the committee of no's, all of us people there, we all form a coalition there. But if you're in that area of your company, really work to integrate your system or integrate yourself into the system from the very beginning, from the design stage of it, as opposed to thinking of yourself as just review. I think if you think of yourself as just review, you can utilize any number of metaphors that work with your raisin. A horse is out of the barn, I don't know, whatever goes with it. But if you think of yourself as just the review, then I'm telling you, people are going to be already utilizing the tools and you're not going to know about it. They're going to try to avoid the review system. Whereas if you really kind of create a policy and a process where you're involved at the very beginning stages in creating it and developing it and guiding it, it's going to create a much better process for you and for the people who utilize those tools in your company.
Thank you, Carly. It's so critical because, right now, one of the things you can start doing is starting small and take everything and break it down to a routine task, because we're going to have to de-skill, upskill, and reskill. And so we got to find out what are those skills that we're not going to be using anymore, just like I don't use fax machines much anymore. And then, so what do we need to learn going forward? So that's the first thing you can start doing as an organization, is start mapping that out. I want to go to my favorites, Ashley, on I really look forward to your information, because as president of the Lenexa Chamber, you're hearing a lot of concerns from the membership about AI and, what does it do? What are you hearing out there?
Well, I do think this is a very valuable question, and I'm glad to be able to share with you what it is that I'm actually hearing about from the business community as I'm talking to them related to AI, because I can share that it really follows a very traditional bell curve. At one end of the bell, there are companies, probably like many in this room, who are pretty sophisticated about their deployment of AI. They have experience with it, they're using it or well on their way to using it, and not only do they see the benefits, but they see the risks and concerns, and those are things that they're addressing. And from that cohort, what I really hear is they are managing the potential skills mismatches that can happen among the workforce once AI is deployed. They are concerned about managing workforce fears, worries, and concerns about just change in general and potential job displacement specifically. And so that's where, Scott, you've talked about there's a lot of focus on reskilling, upskilling, trying to minimize those job displacements. And also they talk a lot too about just the culture, and I know, Rick, that you talked about that too. Just trying to create a culture of innovation within that company that looks positively at change, and that innovation is not only a good thing, it's a necessary thing. And so that's been all part of the strategy that I hear them talk about. I also hear a lot about costs. Depending on what you're doing, it's not insignificant, and for many companies it requires a realignment of their resources. So just managing that cost realignment, and then part of that again is managing the workforce concerns about what that kind of resource allocation could mean for the company and for them as a workforce. And then I think, as we've heard from everybody on the panel, there is an overarching concern about data protection and data privacy, and making sure that they have the policies and the processes and the training. Those first two don't matter if you don't have sort of the ongoing training to meet the requirements in that regard. But what I can say is that that is a fairly moderate segment of the business community. The biggest part of the bell are companies that are really beginning to dip their toes and just initially beginning to engage with AI. A lot of the interest comes from a workforce perspective. I think there is interest in seeing how AI tools can make the employees that they have more efficient, more productive, perhaps more effective. But what I really see beyond that, the interest is there, but there is a very real practical gap in how to move their company forward with using AI. There is not a good understanding among many companies of the full spectrum of tools that are out there and how they can be applied to their specific business, how they can be integrated into their operations. And that's a real hurdle. Many of them are, again, at an elemental level of basically using ChatGPT for some content creation. And so how do you take that next step? They're intimidated, they're worried, there is fear. And so I hope one takeaway that many of you who do feel very comfortable with AI will remember when you're talking with a lot of other businesses, they're not on your level yet. And so, kind of talking to them as, somebody who is just starting out in AI, I think is really important. And I think there is a lot of opportunity for us as a chamber. We've tried to provide educational resources, connect people with opportunities to learn, but it's been very broad what we've done. And where I see us needing to take that next step is to provide more specific opportunities. I went to a conference and I saw some AI tools actually demonstrated in real time, and it was such a game changer for me. And that's what I feel like we need to do for so many businesses who are just getting started on this journey, is to bring in some of the AI experts and just show them this is what can happen, and take some of that mystery out of it. But I hope you'll take that away. At the other end of the bell, of course, there are companies for whom AI isn't even really on their radar screen yet. And, I think it's going to have to be, but there are people who at this point don't see that AI is going to be a benefit for their business. But what I can say too is that there is a couple of areas of concern that across the bell tend to come up. And one of them will be one with this group, won't be surprised at all. And the other one might be a little bit of a surprise, and it's a little bit off topic for tonight, but I'll share it because it is something that I hear about. The first one that is pretty general across the bell is just the impact of AI on human resources. You don't have to be deploying AI within your own operations to have to pay attention to how it is impacting your human resources process, because job seekers are using AI. So if you're hiring anybody, you need to be looking at your HR process and say, are there changes we need to make to pivot because of this change in job seekers? Do we need to be asking different questions? Do we need to be asking them differently? And for the people who are more, I think, sophisticated with AI and might be using an AI algorithm in their HR, the things I hear from them, and you've already mentioned it, there is concern to make sure there isn't bias. That's something that they're very aware of. There is questions about how do you account in the process for emotional intelligence and judgment, things that were traditionally part of HR, which is not always a very black and white field. How does that fit into this? Where do we fit that into it? And then again, just the overarching data privacy and protection concerns, where you want to make sure that your employee information and job applicant information is not inadvertently dispersed to third parties in a way that you don't want it to be. The second area that you might be surprised that I actually hear about related to AI is just its impact on the power infrastructure. Obviously, technology and AI in particular has huge power demands. I don't know if you read the Kansas City Business Journal, they've done some stories on this, but just the hyperscale projects coming in, like Meta and Google, their power needs are the equivalent of 100 Walmart stores. So very tremendous demands on the power infrastructure. And at the same time, what we've seen is since the pandemic, there's a big focus on reshoring manufacturing. And that has created very large, almost hyperscale industrial projects that also have very high power demands. And so the two together are really straining the country's power infrastructure to its limits. And so where do we go from? I can tell you, in economic development 10 years ago, we didn't worry about the power demands of a project. It was not a limiting factor. That is completely different today. I regularly have projects that go across my desk that we can't entertain, we can't accommodate, because we don't either have the power capacity or the timeline to serve that project goes beyond the project's timeline. And when I say the timelines, power now, there is such a supply chain shortage of things like switches and transformers that it is months, if not years. There's projects that they say we can't get to for 3 or 4 years. So it is a big issue, and when I say projects coming across my desk, it's not just big tech projects, it's not just big industrial projects. The power grid is at a point now that those projects are having ripple effects all the way down the development pipeline. It is up and down. And so, businesses that I talk to, it's kind of that yin and yang, like there's interest in AI, but they also are seeing. A few years ago, I started getting phone calls from companies and buildings saying we're having intermittent power outages. So it's a very real thing, and so it's sort of that love-hate relationship, I think, a little bit with AI, that's happening. So, and it is something that the Chamber, I mentioned what we're trying to do to connect businesses with educational opportunities and where I think we're going. And on the power side of things, I will say there is broad agreement that we have got to do something. AI technology is just going to keep the horses out of the barn. So we've got to keep we've got to keep building that infrastructure. That's something that we've been involved with, not only with stakeholders but with our policymakers. Last year in Kansas, there was a bill that we helped support that reduces barriers and provides incentives to invest in that kind of infrastructure, which I think is very important. I think something similar is happening on the Missouri side. It passed with almost no opposition. Evergy is now building some natural gas facilities farther out in Kansas, but once those are operational, those will provide more bandwidth, allow that power bandwidth to stay in Kansas City. But unfortunately, it's an issue that doesn't have a quick solution. So.
Actually, thanks so much for that. Everything you just said, we could have about a 4-hour breakout on, because there's so much backed into that. Well, we've arrived at our ending time. But a quick question before we go to Q&A is, how many people are actively using AI within the organization now? And I imagine probably if we meet again, all your hands will be going up just because of the way it's coming. With AI, I've got a lot of friends of mine that try it, and they say, well, this bunk, it doesn't really work. It's not spitting out the stuff that I want. And that's because they haven't learned how to use it yet. Once you really learn how to use it, it's just powerful. But if we go ahead and open up with questions and answers, and we're going to have Chris is going to be out and about, and I think Will's out with microphones. But does anyone have a question?
Can I grab one of the mics from the panelists? Why don't you point to the person you want to take the questions? So this gentleman
Right.
Thank you. Good evening. First time being here. My name's Adam Catelli. I'm a representative of the Jackson County GOP, Conservative Chamber of Commerce, and I'm currently working on a project, private equity distribution programs. You might know it better as a universal basic income, basically. And it's a county level distribution program where people get monthly or annual paychecks. And I guess my question would be, have you been approached by individuals or NGOs regarding AI-backed UBI or anything like that? And if so, is there a specific example or similar program?
I think one of the things that you're talking about is, if you read Mustafa Suleiman's book, The Coming Wave, he's co-founder of DeepMind rather, as he's talking about that, it's because, as robots come in, let's say a manufacturing plant, so let's say I got a 3,000 member plant, and all those people are paying taxes. Let's say I go down to 1,000 employees. Those 2,000 employees aren't paying now. What do? You got to tax the robots and things like that. So there's a lot of different things that we're still early stage, but that's probably where that universal income is going to come out, is because if that person is displaced, then it's going to have to come from the organization because they're still producing the same amount, right? And so they shouldn't reduce costs, they should just pass it on as universal income. But that's a complicated topic that's going to be coming our way for sure. That's a great question.
I was just going to say, I think it's super interesting to think about, like, and it remains to be seen, what is the total impact on job loss and job creation from AI. But the Stability AI's co-founder did a really interesting presentation where he's talking about kind of the future of employment, among other things. And one of the things he was talking about is we've got to find a way to keep all of these young people, especially young men, keep them busy. How are we going to do that? And I'm expecting this grand answer about some kind of purpose-driven thing. And he says, online porn, online gaming, online, gambling, and drugs. And I'm thinking, this is not the vision. I do think there's an opportunity now for people to really think about, for those people who, like, what can I do now to upskill to make sure I'm not in a position where I have to rely on that. And I think now we're in this really unique period where there is a great opportunity to really figure out how can you upskill and learn to use AI well, but also what are those skills that the AI cannot do well, and look for opportunities to do that, get the right mentors as well.
Absolutely. Smart companies now will start designing their training programs. Who's next? Want to go in the back?
Hi. So my question at a high level is, how should we use AI tools to improve our resumes, in the future? And before you answer that question, I want to tell you about a recent incident that happened at work where my manager had an open position for another analyst and got some resumes, and she found one that looked kind of suspicious. And she passed on to the rest of the team. Several of us coworkers looked at it and we agreed, yeah, that's very suspicious, it's unbelievable, and we passed on this guy and hired somebody else. Now, it looked like he most likely used an AI tool to probably write his entire resume. And it wasn't so much that the problem was that he used AI to write a resume or even parts of his resume. It was the fact that it looked like, it's not a fact, but it looked like he probably used an AI tool and used the output unedited, didn't make any changes, he just copied and pasted. And it looked like he wrote into the prompt, write me a resume that meets 100% of the requirements of this job description, which made it just totally unbelievable because nobody ever meets 100% of our job description. Successful candidates usually meet about 80% or something like that. So my question is, how should someone use AI to, improve their resume, or maybe even write their resume, but improve the resume to make so that you look like you're a smart person and not a dumbass?
Well, that's a great question, and a couple of the tools I mentioned before are helpful for that, but as recruiters or hiring managers, you also have to, a couple of things, you have to look at those, like, that's crazy, you knew that it wasn't real, but as we get resumes, and my son's a perfect example, he's not here, so I can tell the story, but he used chat to write some things, and one of our senior recruiters here, and she interviewed him, and he couldn't back up the what he wrote because he used AI to write it, and we had to coach him on, you can't do that, you have to be very careful, and he's young, so he did it. But you have to be able to back up what you say, what you have on your resume, and that's why recruiting, there's a lot of changes going on with recruiting and AI, but the human touch still needs to be there with a person asking these questions to understand, like, are they a fit? Talk to us about what you mean when you wrote, you have this experience on your resume. And on the flip side of that too, there's really smart people out there that don't write great resumes. They write really bad resumes. So you have to be able to, like, try to figure out the happy medium right in the middle. So to answer your question about how do you write a good resume, I say you can take portions of the resume maybe and say, how can I enhance this based on I'm Joe Smith writing this resume. Here's my LinkedIn profile. You can copy paste that into the whatever AI program you're using, and it will pull from that. And then if you have your own website, you can put that in there too. That'd be really cool. And then just say, based on my experience, how am I a better fit for this position that I'm applying for? You can copy and paste that position in there too, and it'll give you some really good information. Not all of it will be correct. You have to fact check it. You have to look at it and really dial it down and make sure it makes sense. But even if it gives you some ideas on how to craft some bullets in your resume or the way to word things, it's going to give you a really good starting point than if you were just like, I don't know what to do. That Teal app that I talked about, or program, whatever it is, you can say, using my LinkedIn profile, create a resume for me. And so if you have a really nice LinkedIn profile, it can do the work for you there, but then you need to go in and fine tune it. All these programs, everything we're talking about, there still has to be that human touch. You have to put your own voice on it, and it's really important. But you always want to use keywords that are in the job description, and make sure those are in your resume. And every time, I'm just preaching to the choir hopefully, but every time you apply for a job, you have to change your resume. Every time, because you need to make your experience based on what that job description is asking for. Make sure it's shown in your resume if you have the experience. You never want to lie or make things up, because you can get called out on that, and that's a really good story you had.
One of the challenges we got going on right now is like easy apply. It's going to apply to 500 jobs while you sleep. So people are taking these AI resumes, put it to easy apply, applying to 500 jobs. So what's happening to hiring companies is they're getting slammed on their Indeed spend because we got all these bot resumes coming in. We got bots reading bots. So when you think about the resume, well, I think about the Notre Dame football coach before AI was around. He faked his resume, and he still got the job till he got fired. CEO of Radio Shack before the internet. He faked his resume, he got the job. 2 years later, they fired him because he faked the resume. So faking resumes is something we've done all along. But everything you've heard on this panel tonight is why I say you got to throw everything out the window and reinvent. Because it's crazy, and it's getting crazier on all the tech. And that's why I keep telling people, go old school. And just a real quick story. I used to do a lot of advertising for Outbacks from here to Long Island. Paducah, Kentucky was short 30 servers. So go old school, let people walk in between 2 and 4. They had all 30 servers in 30 days. Meanwhile, Long Island, they said, oh no, they're going to have to use the internet. They're still suffering. So, old school is new school. So to me, is you just got to get real like we used to.
Hey Scott, we got a question back here from our resident cybersecurity expert, Tracy, the safety lady Hawkins. So I do want to plug her. She's also on the board of the AI Club. She is having a cybersecurity training workshop here on March 27th. We will put that on our website. But there's a lot of cybersecurity issues. I'm not going to steal your thunder, so Tracy, please ask your question.
Okay, thank you so much, Chris. I have not heard the word deepfake yet. And in my presentations, I do show and tell. And so the red flag that I am raising is, you talked about voice impersonations. What about the deep fakes? Because they're getting better and better. So how do you know, as an HR professional, that the person you're interviewing, even virtually, is actually a real person and not a deep fake? Do you have any rules in place for that? And I also heard you talk about the voice deep fakes. So it takes a matter of seconds to duplicate someone's voice. If you're doing telephone interviews, do you have a system in place to know if it's a real person or a deep fake voice?
I'll jump in real quick and I'll add insight I saw this week, I think in the New York Times, that, and it piggyback off of what Scott was just saying, old school is new school. And there's a report now that Google and some other Silicon Valley companies are now going back to in-person interviews in order to prevent this very concern. And in particular, they had a concern with people faking their coding abilities by, they're doing a virtual interview and you're supposed to be able to code on the fly, demonstrate you have that skill set, and people are having AI do it while they're live in the interview. So they said, okay, we're going to bring them in person, we're going to put them in a conference room. There's a whiteboard and a dry erase marker. And so I do think that until technology gives us the answer, and maybe one of these ladies can comment on whether there is a technological answer that gives us the solution there, I think the old school, in person, seeing someone face to face is kind of the starting place.
We're coming to the top of the hour, so if we could start with Rick, we'll just come all the way down the line here with any final comments you might have.
Well, I think probably the most important thing to me is transparency. If you want employees to really engage in this process, they need to know what's being collected, they need to know why it's being collected, and they need to know how it's going to be used. So you have to have the safeguards in place in order to make progress in innovating some of these new technologies. So that's the final point I think I would make.
We've talked a lot about the scary stuff, and so one thing I want to talk about is one of the benefits that we've not touched on, particularly in workforce development. How many of us have been victimized by the click-through training, where you just sit there and click your mouse till you get to the end? You got to do it annually, every year, all of that. How amazing would it be, and I think we're going to get there pretty soon, if that was hyper-personalized, so that it was only testing you on the things you actually need to know for your role in your job, and only testing you on that which you have demonstrated a lack of knowledge. And how much better would our workforce be trained once we get to that point? And those are the developments that I know they're coming. There's some early stage ones out there that I think are monumental. And when we talk about training, retraining, retooling, and developing those who we work with.
My final comment has to deal with critical thinking. And one of my concerns, and I raised this with my students, and there are recent studies talking about how overuse of AI can result in loss of cognitive abilities and critical thinking abilities. And so I think one of the things that's really important to emphasize is the importance of not overly relying on it. I mean, utilize it, as has been mentioned several times tonight, utilize it as a tool, make it your own, question it, be critical, do other activities to develop your critical thinking abilities, because that is what's going to help keep you marketable in this new age of AI.
I was just going to say something very similar to that, is you do need to embrace AI, and we have a lot of creatives we work with, creatives, copywriters, they're very nervous about AI and they think their jobs are going to be gone, but you need to embrace it and find a way to make it enhance what you're currently doing. And if you can be the expert in that too, in your field, then that's another good thing for you too.
My final thought is really that I think one of the secret sauces to Kansas City's big wins that we've seen over the last 5 or 10 years is just the very collaborative spirit that we have in the region, and how everybody can sort of see where we need to have intention and then comes together and works to do that, which I think is showing not only in some of the businesses, but also a lot of workforce positivity that's happening right now. So and my final thought is I want to thank you all for coming out, and I want to give a special thanks to putting together such a thought-provoking program, to Scott and to Kristen for having us all here, and I'd like to just lead a little round of applause just for all of us.
No, he only does this because I came to the first AI club, and I appreciate what you guys are doing. We've talked a lot about boosting AI and what it does for people. One of the things is sleep better when Hansen. We figured out a way to measure a workforce's sleep deprivation crisis and the cost to it. We do it within an already employee. Have you guys thought about screening for sleep-deprived employees that are going to end up costing you absenteeism? They're going to cost you a lot of cost and revenue down the way. How are you going to use AI to screen out, not screen in?
Whoa. I think that's, I think that's for the next question or the next panel that we have, because You know, in 31 years of doing that, I've never had anyone scream for sleep deprivation, although I've had it. But I really appreciate, one final comment for me is like, and thinking about what Carly was saying, is, right now I'm already teaching companies is, like, I did this for a friend of mine the other day, that's a longtime client. She had a sales rep that she wasn't sure about. So what I did is I took the job description, and you got to blind the resume. Do not put their information in there. Blind the resume. I say, would this person be a good fit for this role? Why or why not? So that way you check on the hallucinations. I said, now do a skill gap analysis on what's required for this role, what their experience and skills are. And then let me know what they are. Then let's design a personalized onboarding and training program. Boom, there it was. And so she took that to the hiring manager. The hiring manager at first was poo-pooing this person. And then after he read this, and he goes, oh, this is simple enough. We can fill those gaps. So we get 100% ramp time productivity just as quick as we can. So there's ways you can do that with chat right now. And one of the things I will tell people, I'm like, personally, I'm saying learn AI. Don't buy some of these softwares right now because they're changing so fast. Chat was down today for a little while. If your business was based on Chat GTP, like a friend of mine, Lou Adler, has People GTP or PBHGP, he was out of business today. So if you're basing your business on LLM, that's high risk. But I sure appreciate everybody coming in tonight. I appreciate the time. I appreciate everybody coming here. If you will, look up the Kansas City AI Club, because we're going to have continuing education. We're going to have a lot of breakouts, training, and workshops. And if you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out to anyone on the board, Chris, and we'll have final thoughts.
Yes, sir. Well, I just want to say, can we please give another warm round of appreciation, I guess, for the and Scott down here. So we got about 15 minutes or so please hang out, network for a little bit. We also want to let these fine people go home and be with their families. So thanks again for joining us. Stay tuned for more information on upcoming events and be safe on the way home. Good night.
Nice meeting you. Very nice meeting you.